It is 11:30 at night. A person lies in bed, exhausted, eyes stinging, holding a glowing phone above their face. They know they should be asleep. They wanted to sleep an hour ago, and yet their thumb keeps moving, pulling the screen upward. One more video, one more scroll. This video is about that hour. It is about why a tired person who genuinely wants to sleep will fight their own body to stay awake in the dark. So let's give this behavior its real name. In 2014, a researcher named Floor Kroese at Utrecht University described something she called bedtime procrastination. It is the act of going to bed later than you planned, for no outside reason at all. Nobody is keeping you up. There is no emergency. You simply do not go. She built a scale to measure it and found it was strongly linked to poor self-control and to not getting enough sleep. But is this just a quirk, or does it actually matter? In 2022, a team led by a researcher named Vanessa Hill pulled together 43 separate studies on this exact behavior. The pattern was consistent. People who delayed their bedtime had lower self-control, slept less, slept worse, and felt more tired the next day. It was not a harmless little habit. It was quietly stealing hours from millions of people night after night. Which means we have a real puzzle on our hands. Why would an intelligent, tired person choose, again and again, to hurt their own sleep? The answer, it turns out, is not really about sleep at all. It is about freedom. So to understand it, we have to look at what the whole day felt like before that moment. In 2000, two psychologists named Edward Deci and Richard Ryan laid out a theory of what humans need to feel well. Near the top of the list was autonomy, the feeling of having control over your own life. Not wealth, not comfort, control, the sense that your time is actually yours. But for most people, the daytime hands that control to someone else. In 2019, a researcher named Anya Van Latham reviewed the evidence linking work to sleep. Across many studies, one pattern stood out. High demands and low control at work predicted worse sleep later on. When people felt trapped and pushed around all day, their nights suffered for it. The body carried the day's captivity into the dark, and the numbers on overwork are blunt. In a study by a researcher named Mariana Virtanen, people working more than 55 hours a week were nearly 4 times as likely to struggle falling asleep as those working normal hours. And for people who did those long weeks over and over, the odds were worse still. Another analysis of how Americans spend their time found that the single biggest thing people traded away for sleep was work, then commuting. The day eats the edges of the night, and the night quietly gives way. So imagine that whole day, told when to wake, when to arrive, when to eat, when to speak, when to leave. Every hour spoken for by someone else. And then, finally, the lights are off, the house is quiet, and for the first time all day, no one wants anything from you. That dark, silent hour is the only piece of the day that feels like it belongs to you. Which means staying awake is not really about the phone. It is a small, stubborn act of rebellion. Researchers who interviewed people about this heard the same thing over and over. They described the late-night hours as their only me time, their one moment of control, even while knowing it wrecked their sleep. One study called it satisfying but destructive. You are trading tomorrow's energy for tonight's freedom. But the job does not always stay at the office anymore, and that makes the rebellion sharper. In 2022, a researcher named Yang Hu studied people who used their phones for work after hours. He found that the more the job reached into their evening through messages and email, the more they procrastinated at bedtime. The likely reason was self-control depletion. By fighting off work all evening, people seemed to use up the very willpower they needed to put the phone down and sleep. And researchers who studied this behavior closely found it is not one simple thing. Some people delay sleep on purpose, guarding the time. Others drift past bedtime almost without noticing, one tap leading to the next. But underneath both, the same thread kept appearing. People described the late night as the only stretch of the day that felt like their own. They knew it was costing them. They did it anyway. That is the strange heart of it, a choice that feels like freedom and works like self-harm. So the phone is the tool of the rebellion, but it is not innocent, and here we have to be honest about it. In 2015, a researcher named Anne-Marie Chang at Harvard compared reading on a glowing screen to reading a paper book before bed. The screen readers took longer to fall asleep, their bodies released less of the sleep hormone melatonin, and they felt groggier the next morning. The light itself was pushing their internal clock later. And the effect shows up at large scale. In 2016, a researcher named Ben Carter combined studies covering more than 125,000 young people. Having a screen device in the bedroom was linked to worse sleep and more daytime tiredness. And strikingly, this was true even when the device was simply present but not being used. The mere possibility of the screen, sitting within reach, was linked to worse sleep. And almost everyone keeps it within reach. In 2020, a researcher named Sina Bozkurt found that about 9 in 10 people use their phones in bed for an average of more than 2 hours a night. The rebellion has a screen built into its own bedroom, glowing quietly, every single night. So we have a person, stripped of control all day, reaching at night for a device that is quietly wired to keep them awake. But before we blame willpower entirely, there is one more piece, and it is a kind one. For some people, the late night is not rebellion at all, it is biology. Because not everyone's internal clock runs on the same schedule. In a well-known study, a researcher named Till Roenberg found that for about 70% of people, their natural body clock and their social clock, the one set by work and school, are more than an hour apart. For a night-leaning person forced to wake early, being told to sleep at 10 is like being told to sleep at 7. Their late-night alertness is not a discipline failure. It is a mismatch between their biology and the schedule the world hands them. And when that mismatch is fixed, people change overnight. In one factory study, a researcher named Celine Vetter let workers follow shifts that match their natural clocks, early birds on early shifts, night owls on later ones. The gap between their body clock and their work clock shrank by about an hour. They slept longer, and they rated their sleep as better. Nothing about their willpower had changed, only the schedule had bent to fit the person, instead of the person breaking to fit the schedule. And this reframes the ancient comparison too. It is tempting to imagine our ancestors slept freely, whenever they liked, but that is not what the evidence shows. In 2015, a researcher named Gandhi Yetish measured sleep in 3 pre-industrial peoples who still live close to how humans lived long ago. They did not sleep endlessly or randomly. They slept about 6 to 7 hours, guided by temperature and the setting sun, waking often before dawn. Their sleep was not a corporate schedule, but it was not lawless freedom either. It was shaped by their world. So the story comes together like this. We are built to need control over our own time. The modern day quietly takes that control and hands it to work, to schedules, to other people. And when the night finally arrives, the tired mind reaches for the 1 hour that feels free, using a device that happens to steal sleep in return. So the next time you catch yourself at midnight, exhausted but scrolling, refusing to let the day end, it may help to see what is really happening. You are not lazy, and you are not broken. You are trying to reclaim something that was taken from you earlier, in the only window you have left. The real fix is not to throw away the phone, and it is not to hate yourself at midnight. It is to find a piece of the day that is genuinely, quietly yours long before the night arrives, so the darkness does not have to carry the whole weight of your freedom alone.